The envelope came on a Wednesday. Heavy stock, embossed gold letters, sealed like a royal decree. It sat on the kitchen counter beside a half-drunk smoothie and a pile of bills Marissa never bothered to open. I stared at it for a second, then peeled it open, already guessing what it was. A wedding invitation. Her brother Logan's name practically glittered off the card, entwined with some debutante named Celeste Preston. I didn't need the footnote to know the Prestons were old money, the kind of wealth that had corridors named after them in museums, not just buildings. The kind that made people like Marissa buzz with ambition and polish their smiles. She walked in just as I was reading it, holding up 2 swatches of fabric like they mattered. "Try to dress up for once," she said, her tone breezy, already flipping through a designer catalog spread across the island. "Logan's marrying into the Prestons. It's going to be huge." Of course it was. Everything was always huge with them. Dinners, fundraisers, reunions. Lavish, public spectacles that made them feel important and made me feel like furniture. She didn't ask if I wanted to go. She didn't have to. It was never a question. We were going. She caught the pause in my breath, the way I lingered too long over the card. "Don't start," she added, not looking up. "It's just a weekend. One weekend. Smile, show up, and don't embarrass me." That last part landed like a slap she didn't even notice throwing. It wasn't the first time. I wanted to remind her I'd been showing up for 10 years. For her family's events. For holidays where I was treated like a temporary seat filler. For dinners where I was the joke at the far end of the table, laughed at because I had dared to leave law school and chase some startup pipe dream. They didn't know who I really was. Not the Prestons, not Logan, not even Marissa anymore. Somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten. Or maybe just stopped caring to remember. I could have reminded her. I could have told her that the startup pipe dream became Atlas Industries. That while she and her family drank champagne and gossiped about me, I'd been working 15-hour days behind closed doors, slowly building one of the most influential tech firms in the country. That I had deliberately kept my name off the filings, off the press releases, off the radar, because I didn't need applause. I needed leverage. But I didn't say any of that. I just folded the invitation neatly and slid it back into the envelope. "Sure," I said, my voice calm. "I'll be ready." She nodded, satisfied, and returned to her catalog. She never asked what I meant by ready. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt like walking through a rehearsal for a play I didn't belong in. Marissa met with planners and stylists. She gushed about the estate's vineyard and what designers Celeste might wear. She treated it like a royal coronation. Logan was marrying up, and by extension, so was the entire family. Especially her. One night, I caught her on the phone with her mother, laughing. "He'll look presentable." I picked the suit myself. No, nothing flashy. Just enough to blend in. I don't want the Prestons asking where I found him, like I pulled him off a Craigslist ad. I stood in the hallway, out of view, just listening. I didn't confront her. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I sat in my office later that night, opened my laptop, and confirmed the final steps of a business deal I'd been structuring for over 6 months, one that had started with acquiring a small but critical supplier that served exactly one client. Preston Tech, Logan's company. I had watched them slowly grow dependent on us, contract by quiet contract, until they were practically feeding out of our hands. It wasn't about revenge. Not entirely. It was about timing. And this wedding, this spectacle, was the perfect stage. I wasn't just going to attend Logan's wedding. I was going to walk into the belly of the beast wearing a quiet smile and carrying a secret they weren't ready to see. I picked out my own suit. Tailored, dark slate wool, minimalist. Sharp but subtle. No designer logos. No flash. Just precision. Because unlike the Prestons, I didn't need labels to announce my value. I was the label. The night before we left, Marissa kissed my cheek and held up a little gift box. "For the weekend," she said. Inside was a tie clip, gold-plated, monogrammed with my initials in a font that didn't match my style. "Thanks," I said. "Don't forget to smile," she replied. "The photographers are everywhere. And remember, you're a guest. Let Logan shine. This is his weekend, right?" The next morning, we boarded a private shuttle to the estate. Acres of manicured lawns, ivy-draped facades, fountains that looked like they came with Roman permits. It was a kingdom built for people who believed they were born to be applauded. Marissa couldn't stop grinning. "Doesn't it feel like a dream?" I looked out the window. Something like that. But I wasn't dreaming. I was wide awake. And this time, I wasn't just tolerating her family. I was about to reintroduce myself to them. Quietly, thoroughly, permanently. 10 years ago, I stood at Marissa's family dining table holding a glass of cheap wine and a heavy silence, as Logan made another joke at my expense. "So let me get this straight," he said, leaning back in his chair, loud enough for the whole room. "You dropped out of law school to build apps? What's the name of your company again?" Hopeful and hungry. The room laughed. Not politely. Not nervously. Full-throated, smug laughter that felt like it was trained to hit me from all angles. Even Marissa chuckled. She rubbed my back like I was a loyal golden retriever, loyal but pitiful. "He's ambitious," she said, her voice the only thing soft in the room. "He believes in what he's building." That was 10 years ago. I hadn't forgotten a second of it. They didn't know I was building Atlas Industries on a 2-year-old laptop and grocery store coffee, working out of a cramped apartment that shared a wall with a dog that barked like it was being electrocuted nightly. My friends stopped calling. Investors turned me down like I had a contagious disease. I skipped dinners, skipped sleep, skipped birthdays. But every rejection taught me where not to knock. Every failure burned away the noise. Marissa supported me at first, sort of. But she always compared. Logan with his promotion at Preston Tech. Her cousin, Drew, getting his MBA. "Maybe you could network more," she said once, folding laundry. "Like Logan does. He's always at conferences." As if shaking hands was the same as building something from dust. What she didn't know, and never asked, was that I wasn't networking because I was working. Because I was coding, hiring, firing, taking calls with overseas suppliers at 3 in the morning, and learning how to negotiate without blinking. I needed help setting up the company structure without drawing attention. That's when I called Uncle Cyrus. He was a retired civil engineer with just enough savvy and just enough gray hair to be taken seriously by banks and boards. He agreed to be the front man. "Only if you promise to keep your name in the dark," he warned. "If people know who really owns this thing, they'll come for your throat before your first real quarter." So I stayed in the shadows. While Marissa's family gushed over Logan's LinkedIn updates, I built the foundation of Atlas in silence. I watched Marissa become more and more drawn to the shiny things, her mother's pearls, her father's political galas, Logan's golf club events. She'd ask if I wanted to go. I'd say no, not because I was antisocial, because I knew I wasn't ready yet. She started introducing me as just a tech guy. It used to be my husband who's building something. Then it was just my husband. Then it was, oh, he works with computers. Like she didn't know the grit under my nails came from something bigger than a keyboard. Still, I waited. I watched Logan rise through Preston Tech like a man on a trampoline, bouncing higher off the strength of his last name and who he had dinner with. His success wasn't built. It was inherited and polished. He kissed rings. I chewed glass. There was one night I remember too clearly. Our anniversary. Year 6. Marissa booked us dinner at a rooftop spot uptown. Pricey, pretentious, and perfect for Instagram. Midway through the wine, she dropped her fork and said, "Sometimes I think I married the wrong brother." It was a joke. At least, I think it was. But the fork didn't drop itself, and her laugh didn't reach her eyes. I told her, "I'm not trying to be Logan. I'm trying to be something different." She waved me off. Different doesn't get written into wills. And that's when I realized she didn't see me, not the real me. She saw the image of a man with dreams and none of the wealth her family could proudly discuss at brunch. I said nothing that night, just drank my wine and watched the skyline. But I didn't forget. I never forget. Over the years, as Atlas grew, I made sure every decision added weight to a structure no one saw coming. I diversified under shell names. I built partnerships with companies Logan's own firm relied on. I watched him strut into headlines while never realizing how deep my roots had grown beneath the soil he danced on. Marissa never noticed the shift. She thought I was stable, maybe a little boring. She liked when I kept quiet, played the supportive husband at holiday dinners, let Logan dominate the room. I didn't mind. Let them think I was the joke. Let them pour wine and whisper under their breath. I was the ghost in my own marriage, yes. But ghosts have their own power. They haunt, they watch, and they wait. By the time Logan's engagement to Celeste Preston was announced, I was already moving chess pieces. Preston Tech's supply chain was a fragile ecosystem. Atlas, operating through SP Capital and 2 other intermediary firms, began acquiring the smaller suppliers they depended on. Quietly, legally, ruthlessly. It took 6 months. Not a single headline. When the gold embossed wedding invitation arrived, I knew what it really was. Not a celebration. A summons. The joke was over. The nice guy with dreams had built a throne in the dark. Now, it was time to bring it into the light. The morning of the wedding arrived dressed in pastel silk and arrogance. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the cuffs on my slate gray suit, the one Marissa said was too understated for a wedding of this caliber. She wanted me in something loud, something shiny enough to pass her family's inspection. But I didn't dress for their approval. I dressed for control. Marissa swept into the room in a designer gown that probably cost more than our first car. Her hair was pinned up like a sculpture, her earrings sparkling like they belonged behind museum glass. She didn't look at me so much as past me. "Try not to slouch," she said, fixing a non-existent wrinkle on my lapel. "There'll be photographers." I gave her a smile I didn't mean and followed her out the door. The Preston estate looked like something out of a political dynasty's campaign video: rolling vineyards, fountains that danced on schedule, valet drivers in matching jackets. We were chauffeured up the curved driveway in a black SUV, but the moment we stepped out, I might as well have been invisible. Marissa instantly became one with the setting. Her stride matched the gravel paths. Her laugh synced with the chamber music floating on the breeze. She belonged here, or at least thought she did. I was the afterthought, the footnote, the prop. The guests looked like a stock portfolio came to life. Senators, CEOs, a few washed-up actors from daytime soap operas. Everyone looked expensive, bored, and just sober enough to network. They greeted Marissa with cheek kisses and compliments. Most barely looked at me. If they did, it was with that vague, dismissive curiosity reserved for someone's third husband. I scanned the estate, noting the details most would miss. The security team was visible but discreet. The catering company wore branded lapel pins. Photographers moved like shadows, capturing curated moments. And somewhere behind the marble columns and glass walls, the Preston family waited. When we entered the reception hall, Marissa was whisked away by her mother and two aunts like a debutante at her final showing. No goodbye. No glance. I was left to trail behind, unclaimed. My name wasn't on the immediate family registry. Instead, I found myself redirected by a frazzled event planner who looked me up and down, then pointed to the third row. Third row. Not the front with Marissa. Not with Logan and the wedding party. Not even with her cousins and distant relatives. I was seated behind a hedge fund manager's wife and across from a man who spent 20 minutes on the phone arranging a private jet for his dog. I took my seat silently. I didn't come for the flowers or the vows. I didn't need the front row. I was here for the reckoning. Logan made his grand entrance to a symphony of claps and forced admiration. He looked exactly how I remembered, cocky, polished, and hollow. His tuxedo was custom, his smile was blinding, and his confidence reeked of someone who had never truly earned anything. When our eyes met, he looked past me with the same indifference he used 10 years ago when he joked about me being a professional dreamer. The bride, Celeste Preston, was everything I expected. Elegant. Cold. Born into a world where affection was as transactional as a merger. She clung to Logan like she already regretted the contract they were signing. Her family watched the ceremony with proud, empty smiles. As the ceremony began, I tuned out the officiant's voice. Instead, I watched Marissa. She sat in the front row, shoulders straight, smile frozen. She glanced back once. Her eyes landed on me, hesitant, expectant. She had no idea. The vows ended. Applause thundered like cannon fire. Drones flew overhead, capturing the moment. Photographers rushed the aisle like paparazzi chasing a scandal. Champagne was passed before the couple even kissed. At the reception, I drifted through the crowd like a ghost. Marissa laughed with Logan's friends, never introducing me once. Her father gave me a half-hearted nod, the kind that acknowledged presence, not personhood. I found a quiet spot near a marble pillar and watched it all unfold. The power games, the alliances, the whispered deals between drinks. And still, they didn't know who I was. They knew me as Marissa's husband. A man too quiet to be important. A man who'd once been the joke at the dinner table. But that was about to change. I checked my watch, then checked my phone. A message blinked across the screen from Cyrus. All set. Your call when ready. I didn't press send. Not yet. Timing mattered. Logan walked past me, laughing with two men in tailored suits. He didn't look at me. Not once. It was as if I was part of the staff, maybe the IT guy who came to fix the Wi-Fi. Good. Let them underestimate me. It was what I counted on. The DJ switched to a slower tempo. Couples filtered onto the dance floor. The Preston patriarch gave a short speech about legacy and tradition. Logan followed with a speech about innovation and forging new futures together. I sipped my drink and listened closely. Every word was a mirror, hollow, reflective, empty underneath the shine. When the applause ended, Logan raised his glass and said, "To new beginnings." I smiled. Oh yes, new beginnings, indeed. But this wasn't his. It was mine. And tomorrow, the masks would fall. I should have known better than to look for a place card at all. The reception was a sprawling affair spread across 2 levels of the Preston estate, a ballroom above, with gold trimmed everything into view of the vineyard, and a tinted garden area below, supposedly for the overflow guests. They made it sound elegant. It wasn't. It was a polite way of saying, "You're not one of us." I combed through the main hall tables first, ignoring the stares of guests who clearly didn't recognize me. That was the theme of the day, blending into expensive furniture. I scanned each card, row by row, expecting at least a mercy seat near Marissa's extended family. Nothing. I searched again, slower this time. Still nothing. Then came the nudge. "Looking for your seat?" Logan's voice was a rusted knife. Familiar and jagged. He stood beside me, drink in hand, tie slightly loosened like he owned the oxygen in the room. The smirk on his face hadn't changed since that night he called me a dropout with delusions. "There's a table out back," he added, gesturing with his chin toward the lower tier. "Where the help eats." Behind him, a few of his friends chuckled. Not the loud, raucous kind. The sharp, private kind meant to wound without leaving visible scars. Logan didn't laugh. He didn't need to. His smile did all the damage. I stood still, staring at the man who once laughed as I poured coffee from a vending machine during a family gathering. The man who mocked my worn laptop, who told Marissa I was building castles in the cloud and not the kind that pay rent. My wife didn't stop him. She stood across the ballroom, drink in hand, talking to her cousin and laughing at something I knew was at my expense. She glanced at me, caught Logan's smirk, and then she smirked too. That was the moment something final clicked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and stepped 3 paces away from the crowd. My fingers hovered briefly above the screen, not with hesitation, but with intent. Timing was everything. I pressed a contact. Cyrus answered on the second ring. "It's done," I said. He didn't ask for clarification. "All right. Canceling the deal now." I hung up. No threats. No warnings. No theatrics. Just one sentence that would pull the floor out from beneath them. Logan's laughter faltered. He took a step closer. "Who the hell were you just talking to?" I turned my phone toward him. On the screen, the Atlas Industries logo glowed like a lighthouse in a storm. I watched his expression change: confusion, realization, then horror. "The $50 million semiconductor contract," I said calmly. "The one keeping Preston Tech breathing. It's gone." "What?" he barked. "You can't." I just did. His grip tightened around his glass. His jaw twitched. "You don't even work in semiconductors." "No," I said. "I own the company that owns the company that supplies the company you depend on." It took him a few seconds to connect the dots. I could almost see the gears grinding. The failed suppliers they tried to replace over the past few months. The weird delays. The sudden price hikes. The obscure holding company, SP Capital, that emerged from nowhere. The shelf firms. The quiet acquisitions. All roads led to Atlas. And all of Atlas led to me. Marissa was walking over now, her heels ticking against the marble like a clock winding down. "What's going on?" she asked, but her eyes were already locked on my phone screen. I saw the moment she realized. Her lips parted, but no words came. She turned pale. The same Marissa who told me to smile for the photographers. The same Marissa who introduced me as just a tech guy. The same woman who once said she envied Celeste for marrying a man with direction. She'd married one too. She just never bothered to look close enough. Logan's voice cracked. "You're behind Atlas?" I nodded. He stared at me like I'd betrayed a script everyone else had agreed to follow. In his world, I was supposed to be harmless. Background noise. The guy who held Marissa's coat and paid for the valet. But now the joke had a face. And it wasn't laughing. "I told you," I said to Marissa, "I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I just needed the right moment." Panic moved like a ripple through the room. Phones came out. I started. Someone whispered, "Is that the guy from Atlas?" A woman clutched her husband's arm. Waiters paused mid-pour. The string quartet's song stumbled. I walked toward the overflow area Logan had mocked and found my place card. Table 19. Staff overflow, it read. I picked it up, examined the elegant calligraphy like it was a relic. Then I pocketed it. Logan was still frozen. Marissa stood beside him, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. I took one last look at them, the golden boy with no spine and the woman who mistook silence for weakness, and walked back toward the garden. I wasn't just attending the wedding anymore. I was rewriting the guest list. And this time, I didn't need an invitation. The thing about power is this: it doesn't always walk in wearing a crown. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in a gray suit and calm voice, pressing a single button while everyone else is still sipping champagne. Logan came storming after me, footsteps frantic on the marble as I stepped onto the stone pathway that led down toward the garden. His drink was still in his hand, but he wasn't holding it like a prop anymore. His fingers clenched the glass as if it were the only thing tethering him to reality. "What deal?" he demanded, voice pitched with desperation. "What are you talking about?" I turned to face him, the lights of the reception behind him casting a halo around his bewildered face. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "The semiconductor contract," I said evenly. "The one your father-in-law pulled strings for. The one that was supposed to be the big win this quarter. Atlas Industries owns that contract." He blinked, the words not quite computing. "And I continued, own Atlas." For a long second, Logan just stood there, like a man trying to make sense of a foreign language spoken in his own house. "You," he finally said. You're not. Supposed to be me?" I finished. Supposed to be the joke? The dropout with a laptop? Behind him, a few guests had followed. They lingered by the entrance, pretending to admire the garden lights, but I could see their ears twitching. Phones out. Whispers spreading like wildfire. "You're lying," Logan said, but his voice had lost its edge. It trembled now. I kept my name off public filings. Uncle Cyrus was the face while I built the spine. You remember him, right? The quiet one who never said much at dinners? You all assumed he was some harmless retiree. He took a step back. The wheels in his head were finally catching up. I could see it. Every failed negotiation in the past 6 months, every delay from their trusted vendors, every merger they couldn't block because it came from names they didn't recognize. The entire chessboard had been rearranged behind his back. "You sabotaged us." "No," I corrected. "I outmaneuvered you. You built your career on inherited contacts and family handshakes. I built mine on data, grit, and knowing how to move without being seen." More guests trickled into the garden. I saw Celeste's father, Richard Preston, standing stiffly near the grapevines, his jaw clenched. The Prestons didn't like surprises, especially not public ones, especially not on their dime. Marissa appeared beside Logan. Her face was pale, lips pressed so tightly together they nearly disappeared. "What are you doing?" she whispered, but her voice quaked. "I'm answering the question you never thought to ask," I said. "Who I really am." Marissa shook her head like a person trying to undo a nightmare with motion. "This isn't the time. This isn't the place." "No," I said. "This is exactly the time. And exactly the place." Logan surged forward, anger returning like a second wind. "You think this makes you a king? You crashed a wedding and pulled a stunt." "It's not a stunt, Logan. This is business. Real business. The kind you only read about in Forbes, the kind you've never truly understood. Your company runs on chips supplied through contracts you no longer have. Your quarterly earnings are about to tank. Investors will start calling tomorrow. Then your board. Then your father-in-law." He staggered. Actually staggered. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. A commotion near the dance floor broke the moment. Someone had shown one of the groomsmen a breaking news alert. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. Something like, "Atlas Industries terminates $50 million Preston tech supply deal mid-wedding." The timing wasn't coincidence. It was orchestration. Marissa clutched Logan's arm. "He can't do this," she whispered, looking up at me with wild eyes. "Can he?" "Marissa," I said softly, "you spent a decade telling me to be more like Logan. Dress better. Network more. Kiss the right rings." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was heavier than anything she could say. "But you never saw what I was really doing," I added. "Because you weren't looking." Richard Preston made his way toward us, flanked by 2 advisors in black suits. His expression was a mix of fury and calculation. "You'll regret this," Logan spat. "You've destroyed a legacy." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I've exposed one." Richard stopped a few feet away, glancing from me to Logan to Marissa. Is it true? He asked quietly. I held up my phone, showing the Atlas logo, then tucked it back into my pocket. You can confirm it on Monday. But by then, your analyst will already be scrambling. Why now? He asked. I looked at Marissa, then at Logan, then at the sea of curious, blinking eyes gathering like moths around flame. Because you never asked who I was, I said. And I got tired of pretending I didn't matter. Security had arrived, unsure of what to do. Their earpieces buzzed. One stepped forward. Do you want him removed, sir? He asked Logan. But Logan didn't answer. Neither did Richard. Because even they realized this wasn't their decision anymore. I looked at the guard and smiled. You sure you want to escort out the man who holds half the debt on this estate? He froze. His eyes darted to Richard, who slowly shook his head. I adjusted my cufflinks, brushed past them, and made my way back into the ballroom. Not as a guest, not as the help, but as the man who just took their kingdom apart, quietly, surgically, and without raising a hand. The ballroom had shifted, not visibly, not in the decor, not in the arrangements, but something in the atmosphere had cracked, like a fault line splitting beneath marble floors. I stepped back inside and could feel it instantly. The music was still playing, but the notes were hollow. The clinks of champagne glasses sounded more like nerves than celebration. Conversations had gone quieter, sharper, the way people whisper when a car crash happens down the street, but the sound still echoes in their bones. I wasn't supposed to be the center of anything that day. I was meant to stand in the background, to play the polite husband, nod through introductions, smile during toasts, and pretend not to hear the jokes whispered behind crystal rims. But now every head that turned did so for me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the tremor that made the chandeliers swing. Marissa found me near the edge of the room, where the bar met the corridor. She was breathless, still in her heels, her lipstick slightly smudged. Her whole demeanor had changed. Gone was the distant queen of the morning, replaced now by a woman gripping the edges of control. What the hell are you doing? She hissed. I took a sip of my drink and looked down at her, taking off the mask. Her eyes darted around to see who was listening. Do you have any idea what you've done? Marissa, I said gently, look around. And she did. All around us, the facade was cracking. The bride's father was in a corner, jaw tight, speaking furiously into a phone. Logan's best man had vanished entirely. Celeste looked like someone had told her the yacht had been repossessed. Even the waitstaff seemed more tense, like they could feel the tectonic shift through the soles of their shoes. I didn't need a mic. I didn't need a scene. Truth does its own amplification. Marissa grabbed my wrist, pulling me aside toward the hallway near the restrooms. I don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. Why now? Why did I? I stared at her, and for a long second, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw the polished socialite her family had carved from stone. The one who'd coached herself into someone else's world and tried to pull me along like a pet project. The one who stopped saying we and started saying Logan would've. You really don't? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was searching for a script that no longer worked. I've listened for years, I said. Let them talk over me. Let them forget my name. You stood next to them while they did it. I protected you, she snapped. You think I didn't stand up for you? You laughed when they did, I said. You dressed me up to blend in. You never once asked if I liked being invisible. She looked down, ashamed or furious. I couldn't tell anymore. Maybe both. You could have told me, she said. I did, I said quietly. You just weren't listening. The hallway door swung open, and her father entered, flushed and sweating, followed by a man I recognized as his attorney. The elder Langford, James, was a man who rarely looked rattled. That day, he looked like a man seeing smoke in his vault. We need to speak. Now, he said. I looked at Marissa. You want to stay? She blinked. What? I'm done pretending, I said. But you're welcome to decide who you are. I walked past them both and returned to the ballroom. That's when the music stopped. The DJ, clearly informed by some frantic manager or relative, had cut the playlist early. A ripple of awkwardness spread through the room as guests checked their phones. The headline had hit the news feeds now. My bet was that it started as a whisper and landed as a siren. CEO revealed as silent owner of Atlas Industries during Preston wedding, $50M deal canceled mid-ceremony. I didn't need a press release. The truth had already gone viral. Her father followed me back into the ballroom, trying to keep his voice level. You blindsided us, he said. No, I replied. I walked through the front door. You just never bothered to check who was holding the keys. Do you know how this will look? Like the truth. I turned to face him fully. You all thought Power wore a tailored tux and smiled for photos. But Power is the man you ignore. The man who sits in the third row. The man your son mocks, your daughter barely defends. The one who listens. His jaw twitched. There's still time to fix this. I handed him a card. That's the number for my office. If your board wants to talk, they can call Monday. But you should know, every hour, this situation gets more expensive. The card burned in his hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Security was called again, but this time, they hesitated. I watched one of the guards check a message on his phone, glance at me, and then slowly back away. He knew. They all did. The bride and groom emerged from a side room. Celeste's face was pale and pinched, her eyes shooting daggers at Logan, who now looked less like a groom and more like a man waking up inside a burning house. Logan's steps were slow, hesitant. He met my eyes across the floor. No words this time. Just a long, bitter look of someone who finally saw the shadow that had grown behind him for years. I didn't flinch. I stood in the middle of that ballroom and watched their empire begin to tremble. The decorations, the guests, the polite lies, all of it, unraveling thread by thread. And I didn't raise a finger, because real power? It doesn't roar. It arrives calmly and waits for silence. The ballroom had shifted, not visibly. Not in the decor, not in the arrangements, but something in the atmosphere had cracked, like a fault line splitting beneath marble floors. I stepped back inside and could feel it instantly. The music was still playing, but the notes were hollow. The clinks of champagne glasses sounded more like nerves than celebration. Conversations had gone quieter, sharper, the way people whisper when a car crash happens down the street, but the sound still echoes in their bones. I wasn't supposed to be the center of anything that day. I was meant to stand in the background, to play the polite husband, nod through introductions, smile during toasts, and pretend not to hear the jokes whispered behind crystal rims. But now every head that turned did so for me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the tremor that made the chandeliers swing. Marissa found me near the edge of the room, where the bar met the corridor. She was breathless, still in her heels, her lipstick slightly smudged. Her whole demeanor had changed. Gone was the distant queen of the morning, replaced now by a woman gripping the edges of control. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed. I took a sip of my drink and looked down at her, taking off the mask. Her eyes darted around to see who was listening. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Marissa," I said gently, "look around." And she did. All around us, the facade was cracking. The bride's father was in a corner, jaw tight, speaking furiously into a phone. Logan's best man had vanished entirely. Celeste looked like someone had told her the yacht had been repossessed. Even the waitstaff seemed more tense, like they could feel the tectonic shift through the soles of their shoes. I didn't need a mic. I didn't need a scene. Truth does its own amplification. Marissa grabbed my wrist, pulling me aside toward the hallway near the restrooms. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "Why now? Why today?" I stared at her, and for a long second, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw the polished socialite her family had carved from stone. The one who'd coached herself into someone else's world and tried to pull me along like a pet project. The one who stopped saying "we" and started saying Logan would've. "You really don't?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was searching for a script that no longer worked. "I've listened for years," I said. "Let them talk over me. Let them forget my name. You stood next to them while they did it. I protected you," she snapped. "You think I didn't stand up for you? You laughed when they did," I said. "You dressed me up to blend in. You never once asked if I liked being invisible." She looked down, ashamed or furious. I couldn't tell anymore. "Maybe both." "You could have told me," she said. "I did," I said quietly. "You just weren't listening." The hallway door swung open, and her father entered, flushed and sweating, followed by a man I recognized as his attorney. The elder Langford, James, was a man who rarely looked rattled. That day, he looked like a man seeing smoke in his vault. "We need to speak." "Now," he said. I looked at Marissa. "You want to stay?" She blinked. "What?" "I'm done pretending," I said. "But you're welcome to decide who you are." I walked past them both and returned to the ballroom. That's when the music stopped. The DJ, clearly informed by some frantic manager or relative, had cut the playlist early. A ripple of awkwardness spread through the room as guests checked their phones. The headline had hit the news feeds now. My bet was that it started as a whisper and landed as a siren. CEO revealed as silent owner of Atlas Industries during Preston wedding, $50M deal canceled mid-ceremony. I didn't need a press release. The truth had already gone viral. Her father followed me back into the ballroom, trying to keep his voice level. You blindsided us, he said. No, I replied. I walked through the front door. You just never bothered to check who was holding the keys. Do you know how this will look? Like the truth. I turned to face him fully. You all thought Power wore a tailored tux and smiled for photos. But Power is the man you ignore. The man who sits in the third row. The man your son mocks, your daughter barely defends. The one who listens. His jaw twitched. There's still time to fix this. I handed him a card. That's the number for my office. If your board wants to talk, they can call Monday. But you should know, every hour, this situation gets more expensive. The card burned in his hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Security was called again, but this time, they hesitated. I watched one of the guards check a message on his phone, glance at me, and then slowly back away. He knew. They all did. The bride and groom emerged from a side room. Celeste's face was pale and pinched, her eyes shooting daggers at Logan, who now looked less like a groom and more like a man waking up inside a burning house. Logan's steps were slow, hesitant. He met my eyes across the floor. No words this time. Just a long, bitter look of someone who finally saw the shadow that had grown behind him for years. I didn't flinch. I stood in the middle of that ballroom and watched their empire begin to tremble. The decorations, the guests, the polite lies, all of it, unraveling thread by thread. And I didn't raise a finger. Because real power? It doesn't roar. It arrives calmly and waits for silence. The first headline hit before the wedding was over. I watched a woman in pearls gasp at her phone, show it to her husband, and then tuck it into her clutch like it might explode. The ripple spread across the ballroom in real time. Phones lighting up, conversations shifting from shallow small talk to tense murmurs. By the time Logan and Celeste returned from their awkward photo session by the vineyard, the world already knew. CEO crashes wedding with $50 million mic dropped. Preston tech faces collapse after secret owner of Atlas Industries pulls plug. The quiet billionaire who was hiding in plain sight. They all had their own spin. But they told the same story. The man no one noticed had just pulled the rug out from beneath an entire legacy, and he didn't even raise his voice. I didn't stick around for the final speeches. I left quietly. No grand exit, no last words. I walked out through the front entrance while most of the guests were still reeling from the news, murmuring like gossips at a funeral. Some looked at me. A few nodded. One or two clapped, subtly, like they understood what they'd just witnessed. Marissa didn't follow me. She was still inside, probably trying to explain to her friends how this could have happened without her knowing. That was always the thing with her. She hated surprises unless she was the one throwing them. By Monday morning, Preston tech stock had dropped 11%. Investors panicked. Calls went unanswered. Meetings were requested. Damage control began before the coffee even brewed. And Logan? He disappeared from social media entirely. No more golf swing videos, no more rooftop views from corporate towers. Just silence. The board moved quickly, too quickly, if you asked me. They suspended him pending a strategic review. A polite way of saying, we're looking for a reason to toss you without setting off a lawsuit. Celeste's family pulled their PR firm into the mess, but even they couldn't rewrite what had happened. The footage was already online. The internet didn't care about their version. And Marissa? She waited a few days before confronting me. It was late. She came home from her parents' house without warning, standing in our living room like a stranger. She wasn't wearing designer anything. No earrings, no makeup. Just a simple sweater and the same look I saw when I first met her, before the world taught her how to pretend. You planned this, she said, not asking, stating. Yes. Her arms crossed, her eyes scanning me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. You humiliated my family. No, I said, standing. I revealed them. They're ruined. I stepped closer. They ruined themselves the moment they thought power only lived in their circle. The moment they laughed at a man trying to build something from nothing. The moment you stopped seeing me as your husband and started seeing me as the help. She looked away, jaw clenched. You could have warned me. I did, I said quietly. You just weren't listening. You never asked who I was becoming. You were too busy polishing your image to notice the man standing beside you. Silence filled the space between us like smoke. She exhaled slowly. We can fix this. No, I said. You mean hide this? There's nothing to fix. This is the truth, finally. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. Not yet. I stood by you. I shook my head. You stood beside me when it was convenient. But when your family laughed, you laughed too. When I succeeded, you stayed silent. And when I finally took control, you flinched. The tears came then quiet, frustrated ones. She tried to speak, but gave up halfway through the sentence. I filed for separation this morning, I added, gently. It's already with the lawyer. That broke something in her. You're destroying everything, she snapped. No. I replied, voice steady. I'm freeing myself from it. She left that night. Took nothing but her purse and a key I later found sitting on the marble counter. She didn't call, didn't text, and I didn't reach out. The next few weeks were strange. Quiet. My phone rang nonstop, reporters, investors, curious executives trying to figure out who I really was. I declined every interview. I had nothing to prove to strangers. The only calls I returned were the ones that mattered. My lawyer handled the divorce filing discreetly. There was little to split. The home was mine. The investments were shielded. She had access to a joint account, but I let it go. I didn't want her money. I wanted peace. She tried once, just once, to appeal to the past. She left a message late one night. We had something once. Before all of this. I played it once. Deleted it after. Because she was right. We had something once. But it wasn't this. And it wasn't now. My assistant walked in the next morning with an article in her hand. You've gone viral, she said, laughing lightly. People are calling you the polite avenger. I shrugged. They love a headline. But this one, she said. This one feels different. Like justice. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Justice wasn't what I wanted. Just clarity. Just honesty. Just the chance to stand in a room full of people who never saw me, and finally let them look. And now? Now they saw everything. The first place I went after filing the paperwork wasn't a lawyer's office. It wasn't some glass-walled boardroom or coastal retreat. It was my mother's house. She still lived in the same one-story, sun-drenched bungalow she and my father bought in the 80s, back when hope could be financed with grit and a handshake. The lawn was overgrown, and the mailbox leaned a little to the left, but the smell of warm bread still greeted you at the door. So did the creak in the floorboards near the kitchen table. When she opened the door, she didn't say anything. She just looked at me for a long second, and then pulled me into one of those hugs only mothers know how to give, tight, unfiltered, and filled with a language no one else speaks. She stepped back, gave me a once-over. You look tired. I nodded. I've been busy. She motioned for me to come in, and I followed the scent of cinnamon and old wood into the kitchen. A pot of tea was already on the stove, and 2 chipped mugs sat beside a plate of ginger cookies. I hadn't even called ahead. I saw the news, she said, settling into her chair, hands folded. You made quite the splash. I smiled. That wasn't the plan. Just the result. She poured the tea, no rush in her movements, no judgment in her tone. And Marissa? Gone. She sipped. Good. I chuckled. That quick. She raised an eyebrow. She always talked too much for someone who saw so little. We sat in silence for a few moments. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. The wind rustled the trees like they were whispering secrets only the old understood. She really didn't know, my mother asked. No, none of them did. That's how I wanted it for a while. She gave me a look I knew well. You always did like keeping your cards close. Even as a boy, you'd hide your drawings under your mattress. I looked down at the steam rising from my mug. It stopped being about hiding. It became about control. And now, I looked her in the eyes. Now it's about truth. She leaned back and nodded. Then good. Truth makes fewer meals but better company. I laughed softly at that. Leave it to my mother to distill everything down to wisdom and biscuits. She tilted her head, studying me. So what happens next? You going to build something new? I've already started, I said. Different this time. Leaner. More personal. I don't want legacy. I want clarity. She grinned. Finally realized legacy's just a dusty frame people use to hang their egos. That, I said, and I'm tired of feeding people who only eat with silver spoons. We didn't talk about Marissa after that. Not because it hurt, but because there was nothing left to say. The woman who once held my hand through dreams had tightened her grip only when I started shining brighter than she'd expected. My phone buzzed around noon with a message from Cyrus. Logan had reached out, not as a brother-in-law, not as an enemy, but as a man with no real place left to land. He's lost, Cyrus had written, but not stupid. I stared at the message for a while. Then I replied, "Give him a number. Low pay. Entry level. Let's see if humility suits him." Later that week, Logan accepted the offer. He arrived on a Monday morning at the satellite office of one of Atlas's smaller partners. No assistants, no corner suite, no fanfare. He wore a shirt too expensive for the role and a face too proud for the chair he was assigned. But he showed up. Day one. No skipping the line. No backdoors. Cyrus sent me a picture of Logan sitting at a plain desk with a borrowed laptop and a reusable water bottle someone handed him at the front. He made a pot of coffee. The caption read, "Good. Let him sit there. Let him work. Let him learn that not all success has a back door." Marissa, meanwhile, moved back in with her parents. I didn't ask for updates, but the internet never sleeps. A distant cousin of hers posted a story. No driver, no invites, no gala appearances. Just her in a faded hoodie, walking into a boutique alone. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply turned off the phone. My world was quieter now. Not empty. Just intentional. I spent more time at my mother's house in the weeks that followed. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We just sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees, our chairs rocking in unison, our lives finally synced again. One day, I brought her a framed photo. It was a simple shot. Me, standing outside the Preston estate that day, holding the card that read Staff Overflow, Table 19. She looked at it, squinted, then laughed out loud. "You framing this?" she asked. I already did. She nodded approvingly. That's the kind of history worth hanging. And so I did. In my new office, smaller than the last, but all mine, the framed card hangs right above my desk. Not as a trophy, not as revenge, but as a reminder that the table they gave me may have been meant for the help. But I left owning the building. I wasn't surprised when James Langford walked into my office. Just surprised it took him that long. 3 months had passed since the wedding. Long enough for the headlines to shift, for new scandals to rise and fall. But some damage doesn't fade with news cycles. Preston Tech had survived, barely. They'd patched the hole I left, but the ship still leaked. And now, the captain had come knocking. He wore a charcoal suit, impeccably tailored, though it hung heavier than before. The glint of assurance in his eyes had dulled. His tie was too tight, or maybe he just couldn't breathe right in a building he didn't control. He didn't announce himself. No assistant. No calendar invite. Just showed up, asked for a few minutes, and was sent through. My receptionist recognized him instantly but said nothing. Just nodded him in and closed the door behind him with the kind of click that made you realize a different world now sat on the other side. He didn't sit. Not yet. Just stood there, glancing around the space. "Nice office," he said finally. "Not bad for a dropout, huh?" I replied. That made him pause, but only for a second. "I was hoping we could talk." "You are." He cleared his throat. "About Preston Tech." I assumed. A long silence followed. He shifted his weight from one polished shoe to the other. Finally, he lowered himself into the seat across from mine and folded his hands, like he was giving a deposition. "Our company's bleeding," he admitted. "The damage from the canceled contract, it triggered a domino effect. We lost a few investors. One key client. Staff morale's in the basement." I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch, watched him squirm in the chair where so many others had begged for partnerships. "Deals. Rescue. We need help," he said at last. "Strategic input. Liquidity. Maybe even a bridge loan to you." I stopped him there, raising one hand slowly. "You came to me," I said, "for help? After everything." His jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Yes." "Interesting," I murmured. I opened a drawer, pulled out a plain folder, and laid it on the table between us. He eyed it like it might bite. "What's that?" "Options," I said. "Rebuilding plans. Streamlined restructuring proposals. Exit paths that don't end in headlines." "You've already prepared these?" he asked. I smiled. "James, I started preparing these the moment you called me, just a tech guy, over dinner 5 years ago." He didn't touch the folder. He stared at it, then at me. "There's no handout in there," I continued. "No golden parachute. What's in there are actual programs, ones I've developed for smaller firms, struggling innovators, and even legacy core that forgot how to evolve." "And you're offering them to me?" he asked, disbelief crawling into his voice. "I'm offering you the same thing I offered them. Structure, not favors." He reached slowly for the folder and opened it. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the pages. It was all there, graphs, terms, options for asset reallocation, proposals for tech integration, cost-cutting measures that didn't bleed out the future. "No one's going to know we came to you," he asked, voice low. "Unless you give them a reason to," I said. "I don't trade in shame, just accountability." He closed the folder but didn't speak. The weight of his pride sat heavy between us. "You thought power was about appearance," I said, voice calm. "And I'll let you think that. For years. Because I needed time. But now, you're in my building. Sitting in my chair. Asking for my help. That's not revenge. That's a circle closing." He looked up then. For a moment, I saw something rare in his eyes. Respect. Hard-earned. Late. But real. "I underestimated you," he said. "You all did," I replied. "But that's why I won't give you a bailout. Because I know what that does to people like you." He nodded slowly. "And Logan? Working?" His brows rose. I gave him a desk and a laptop. If he wants to earn something, he'll learn how. James stood, folder in hand. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the company. For the workers you'd toss aside to save your name." He hesitated at the door. "You're not cruel." "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm surgical." He left with a bowed head. After he was gone, I stood and walked to the framed place card hanging on the wall. "Staff overflow, table 19. The words still gleamed under the glass. It used to sting. It used to remind me of humiliation. Now it reminded me of power. Not the kind people parade. The kind that waits, listens, builds. Later that evening, I walked through the city streets, coat collar turned up, watching the lights blink in office windows above. Every one of those towers held someone like I used to be, overlooked, underestimated, working behind the scenes. The difference was, I had walked through fire and came out holding the blueprint. Now, even the kings came knocking. And I didn't need to open the door. I already owned the floor. The place card still hangs above my desk, centered, framed in black walnut, preserved like a fossil of who I used to be and what they thought I was. Staff overflow, table 19. They wrote it with calligraphy. Gold ink, thick paper, curled edges. Classy. Elegant. Insulting in a way only the rich know how to deliver. Not crude. Just dismissive. Thoughtful, even, if you think of cattle herding as thoughtful. I stared at that card a long time before I had it framed. Not out of anger. Not bitterness. But recognition. That table was meant for the help. The ignored. The ones they barely thanked for passing the salt. I sat at that table once. And I left owning the building. It's poetic, sure. The kind of line that gets turned into Instagram quotes or LinkedIn motivational posts. But it's more than that. It's proof that real power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. And when the moment's right, it doesn't strike, it simply moves, and the whole board shifts around it. People used to tell me that I was too quiet, too soft-spoken for business. That I didn't demand enough attention, didn't own the room the way Logan did. He had swagger, volume, a polished smile. I had notebooks and silence. But silence is a ledger. It records everything. The day I first stepped into Marissa's world, I told myself I could endure it. That I could bend, compromise, adapt for love, for peace, for the long game. I sat at those family dinners swallowing half-baked jabs and full-bodied arrogance. Her father calling me a young dreamer. Her mother saying I had good intentions, but no pedigree. Logan tossing napkins at me like I was an intern. And Marissa? She smiled through it all. Said it was just how her family was. Asked me not to make a fuss. Said they'd respect me when I made it. But what she never realized was I had already made it. I just didn't need to wear it like a costume. My success didn't come with confetti. It came with quiet late nights, failed prototypes, cold pizza, and deals negotiated in sweatshirts, not suits. I made choices in those shadows. Strategic ones. I stayed off interviews. Declined magazine features. Built my empire under different names, through shell companies and trusted proxies like Uncle Cyrus, until the architecture of Atlas Industries looked like it came from nowhere. Because I was nowhere. Because I was everywhere they didn't think to look. They mocked what they didn't understand. And that was their mistake. In the months since the wedding, the world changed. For them. For me. Logan, now working entry-level in a firm he once dismissed as background noise, sends weekly reports with no complaints. He hasn't asked for a raise, a favor, or a shortcut. Maybe that's growth. Maybe it's survival. Either way, he's learning. Marissa hasn't called. Not once. I'm not sure if that's her pride or her punishment. Perhaps both. I heard from someone that she tried moving out on her own but ended up back in her parents' guest house. The same house where they used to toast champagne to Logan's deals and call me the one who dabbled in tech. I've moved forward. I spend my time with people who don't need to be impressed to be respectful. With builders, creators, quiet minds. I started mentoring again. Not publicly. I meet young entrepreneurs in the early stages, the ones eating instant noodles at midnight while debugging code, the ones who don't yet know how powerful they already are. I tell them the truth. You don't have to be loud to be dangerous. I keep the place card above my desk because it reminds me what most forget, titles or decorations. Power is leverage. And dignity? That's not handed to you. You claim it. Quietly. Firmly. Without begging. I remember walking through the Preston estate that day, past the marble staircases and gilded mirrors. Every inch of that place told a story of inherited wealth. But none of it prepared them for someone like me. A man who had nothing to prove, but everything to reclaim. They wanted me to stay in the kitchen. The background. The overflow. But the thing about the kitchen is, that's where the fire lives. That's where the heat comes from. That's where things are made, broken down, tested, refined. While they toasted champagne, I was learning how to wield flame. Now, I don't wait for permission to speak. I write the agenda. I've kept my company private. No press tours. No exposés. Just action. We've launched 2 new initiatives focused on education and microloans for underrepresented founders. Not as charity, as investment. I don't want to rescue people. I want to equip them. And every time someone sits across from me, nervous, hopeful, underdressed by society's standards, I smile. Because I've been them. Because I am them. I had dinner last week with my mother again. Same kitchen. Same tea. She noticed the watch I was wearing and asked if it was new. It's old, I told her. Just finally fits. She smiled and said, good. Some things take time. That's all this was. Time. Patience. Precision. I stood in the shadows long enough. Long enough for them to forget I had a match. And now? Now they eat at tables I own. And I sit wherever I damn well please.